Hello everyone. My name is Yuval Saar, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Portfolio magazine. And we'd like to welcome you to the 22nd Doc Aviv Film Festival. And we are honored to have here Alla Kovgan, straight from New York City, the filmmaker of Cunningham. She's with us today. This webinar will last about 30 minutes. We extremely invite you to leave your question into the Q&A section right over here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask and we'll address it to Alla. So hi Alla, good morning, is it? It's morning in New York, right?
Yes, bright and early. Not very early, but yes, we're in the morning.
Yes. So let's talk about Merce Cunningham and filming. And maybe the film would be, what can you say about why making film about Merce Cunningham? What attracted to you to dance to this story?
Yeah, so it has been a long journey. The project began in 2012. And, I was always interested in dance film collaborations and in sort of performing arts and cinema collaborations. And I came across Merce Cunningham actually first through his film work. I saw a recording of his performance that was made in 1966 in Germany. It was this black and white recording, and it was it's called Variations 5, and it had multiple screens, projections, plants. Merce was riding a bike. There was some kind of electric poles. There was John Cage with many, many different devices. And I was just like, who was that man? Who could orchestrate all this in 1966? And so that's how I sort of got interested in him. But I never actually imagined to make a film about Merce Cunningham because he's a kind of choreographer who works in space so much, and he would have 16 people going different directions, and as a filmmaker you cannot make a single shot. So what happened in 2011, film Pina came out by Wim Wenders, and I remember going to see that film and thinking, wow, 3D is really good with dance. It basically helps for the audience to experience proximity between dances. It feels like you can almost step inside the dance, and it's all about working in space. So I went to the last performances of the Merce Cunningham Dance Company. The company closed on December 31st, 2011. And I remember sitting there in the audience and thinking, maybe Merce and 3D can be a good fit. So it really started from my interest in trying to translate Merce's ideas into cinema with capital C, rather than sort of capturing his dances or, creating a kind of a biopic. I mean, by that time, there were 18 big films on Merce Cunningham, and so the idea was really try to engage with his choreographic ideas and see how can they be relayed into cinema.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we couldn't see it in 3D yet, but I'm looking forward to it, because when I go to dance shows, I love to sit at the front row. I like to be on the audience, on the dance, to see the muscles, to see the sweating. And whenever I'm thinking about making film about dance, I don't know, it's like two worlds that hardly can live together, but you somehow managed to work on it for 7 years. I want to ask, what took you so long, although I can probably guess.
Right. I mean, I always say, dance and cinema, they're in conflict. I mean, they are interesting art forms because, they're both about organizing action in time and space. Yeah, so we as film directors, when we make a shot, we tell our characters or our people, or even if it's a documentary, we compose the shot, right? So we tell people where to be and what to do. I mean, that's exactly what choreographers do. If you think, I mean, yes, they're working with some of the most interesting movies in the world, but fundamentally we do the same things. But the time works so differently. In cinema, you can go around the world within 1 minute. On stage, you're still on stage for 1 minute, right? So there's all these different things that are complicated, and it's all about sort of reconciling those differences and finding those moments where things can be synced. It's a very complex process, and it's a very time-consuming process. There's a very big name, Busby Berkeley. He did those musicals in 1930s, right? And he would spend, I don't know, weeks and weeks and weeks storyboarding his massive, grandiose shots. And then he would do 2 takes and it'll work. So that prep is really, really what takes a lot of time. Now, I think the reason it took 7 years is because I think half of this time was making the movie and half of the time was convincing the world that it's worth making this movie. It's a massive, French, German, American co-production with, millions of dollars in it. And it's like, why would you make a 3D documentary about an avant-garde American artist in the era of political uncertainty that we all live in? So that was, a lot of people ask that, but it took a while to convince them that it's actually worth making. I mean, first of all, it's never a good time to make films about art, and it's always a good time to make films about art, because actually I think Merce Cunningham would outlive a lot of presidents of the world, so because his ideas and what he was dedicated to are timeless, and that's what I think really pushed me to stick with it. I mean, Merce himself helped me to get through this, because if you think of him, of somebody who persevered for 30 years between 42 and 72, that's like the first 30 years of his time in New York after he left Martha Graham Company, which he also was part of. He had no money, no support, no press, no audience, really. And yet he continued. And if you think of that, that's like, that's daring. That's very moving. And also he continued despite the fact that he was aging. If you think of a painter or, a composer, they can be making their work until they're 91 or whatever, or 101, or whatever they can. And it affects them, the age affects them, but not in a way that the dancer has to deal with it, right? So you have somebody who perseveres, who's at the height of his physical ability, and he cannot perform. And that, as you see in the film, they had no opportunities to perform, right? So for a very long time, so then you start understanding, what it takes, what was happening inside him to just sort of continue. And that really helped me. Whenever I felt like I can't do this anymore because of, we couldn't raise the money and constant this and that, I always remember that he persevered for so long. Continue was his favorite word.
So I'm curious, how do you start? Do you have like a script? Do you do research? Do you know, at which part if you want to shoot something new, if you only real, like 7 years. So can you speak a little bit about the artistic process?
Yeah. So I was very lucky because I had 2 amazing people working with me, directors of choreography, Robert Swinston and Jennifer Goggins. And Robert was with Merce for 32 years and Jennifer was for 12. And, Jennifer became my, right-hand woman. So we had quite a few women in production, which I'm very, very happy about. And, because, women in technology, that's a whole other topic. I mean, women often don't get to make those kind of high technology films. And we really wanted to push that. And our stereographer, Josephine DeRob, is also a woman. She's probably one of the only women, one of the very few, who work with 3D and technology. So, but in any case, together with Jennifer and Robert, we went through 80 works that Merce created between 42 and 72 in that period. These were the years of the first company. In 72, the first company was over. You know, that was a big cutoff for us. Like one of the historians named it as a end of an era, basically. And out of those 80 works, we picked 14. And then out of those 14 works, we picked excerpts to be reimagined for 3D. Now, most of them are iconic works, and most of them are collaborations with visual artists, because that's what I thought was very interesting. How did Merce fit into this kind of fabric of American avant-garde and post-war, postmodern art? So that was something that was the criteria to pick his works. And also, they were really iconic collaborations. Most of them were with Rauschenberg. Robert Rauschenberg was a visual artist, as many of you know, and he was, within that period, between 53 and 64, they made 16 collaborations out of the 22. Yeah, so, and it was a really interesting story about them being together and then falling apart and all that. So, anyway, the other thing what we did is, that process took about 8 months, actually. It was a long process. I mean, 80 works, it's a lot of material. Some of the works were documented, documented very well. They were on video, on film, there were rehearsals, there were performances. Some of the works were just notes. You know, I mean, one dance, actually, I found it. It hasn't been seen for 50 years, this dance called Changeling, when Merce is in this kind of neat costume by Rauschenberg, and then one of our dancers, Silas Reiner, he dances it on the square with 2 stages in red, right? So that's the dance was lost completely. They were just notes, but you know, I had a Cunningham historian, David Wong, who kept the cards, like the little index cards where he recorded every single thing that happened with Merce. So we managed to go through them again and found where that dance was, you know, what happened to it. So, you know, 50 years later, we found it some German archive in its entirety. So things like that happen. I mean, you know, when we make films, we of course discover things. So, but Merce, you know, what's very important, I mean, we were making cinema. Yeah, we were not making a real kind of capturing dance. And that's very important, because cinema does not think in proscenium stages, right? It's thinking in places and spaces. Because, I mean, no filmmaker would think about putting the dance on stage unless it's part of the story, right? So Merce often, so how did we pick those locations? I mean, Merce often began making his dance not from a story or from a kind of music piece or mood or state. He often began with a physical action, right? So he's interested in the action of falling. So he would make a gamut, like a set of movements, let's say, you know, I don't know, 100 of different ways to fall. And then he would use chance operations, which is whatever it is, like say throw dice, or coins or whatever it is, and then he will identify which movement comes first, which second, who does it, which direction, and then there will be impossible choices sometimes that the chance makes, the providence makes, and he would stick with them and will try to work them out physically. This idea of using chance had to do with his attempt to free his mind from itself, from the cliches that the mind often, and from the habits that we always, you know, follow. So we identify those physical ideas behind each dance, and then we would think how cinema would think about those ideas. So if it's an action of falling, like Winter Branch, it's a dance that's on the rooftop with this kind of flashlights. You know, what is falling in cinema? Now, in cinema, you don't have to fall to experience falling. It's all about illusion. I mean, think about Hitchcock, think about Vertigo. So we were thinking, okay, well, if we put the dance on the rooftop, you know, and choreograph our camera in such a way that you have a sense of height, the idea of falling will come through. So there was this really kind of long process of trying to figure out where those locations can be and what they are. Like, I can give you another example. If it's dance Rune, 1959, in that dance, Merce explored the idea of layering. So the action happened in the foreground, middle ground, background. So, okay, we thought about the woods. you know, where you can make the dances part of the forest so that they become another layer. Now, you don't know that, you know, but hopefully the spirit of the dance comes through, you know, when you see the dance as part of this. So no location is sort of a random location. So then we did the rehearsals in the summer of 2013, 6 weeks of rehearsals, 6 times a week, 6 days, you know, 6 hours a day, long rehearsal process, where the dancers learned everything. Now, it's important that dancers are all Cunningham trained dancers, except for one. You know, all of them were pretty much members of the last company that, and they were trained by Merce. So I think for me, that was another very, very important thing. But of course, we were very worried that it took us so long to raise money, and it took me so much to do research. I mean, it took a year and a half to write a script, and I had to write like a proper script, almost like a fiction, but that's based on the actual archival materials, because we're working with France and Germany, and there they really want you to sort of have the script. And so we filmed only in 2018. The filming took only 18 days. The whole film was filmed
18 days.
Yes. Yes. It was only 18 days. 7 years. Yes. The storyboarding process took, I mean, my director of photography and I, and with Josephine at some points too, we storyboarded everything. So whenever we showed up on set, we basically knew exactly what we're going to do. Because again, we only had those days. That's all the money we had to do that. And, you know, we basically did a day per dance, except for Summer Space, which was 2 days in France, and Rainforest with Warhol Pillow, that was 2 days. And of course, I wish we had at least 2 days for every dance, but it was impossible. So it was kind of like a military service on set, you know, just to kind of feel like, okay, you know, camera action, everybody knows what's going on. But it was very well rehearsed, and of course it was very storyboarded. So the hardest thing was to actually try to, you know, teach the Merce's choreography to the crew. That not to, because they had to also learn it. It's funny because, you know, I was talking to Wim Wenders, who also saw a film, and he said, well, actually, they told me first, the crew, because some of the crew was shot in Germany and some of the crew worked on Pina, you know, 10 years earlier. So they were telling me like, you know, in Pina, we just followed the music. Stravinsky goes, ah, you know, and like, and camera goes, ah, you know, like, but here there's no music. We have to actually look at the dances and we have to remember the choreography. It's silence. So imagine that. So anyway, I just keep rambling, but that was the process. Then, you know, took a year to edit, year and a half, actually, no, a year, yeah. And that was the journey.
You had a very detailed storyboard and a very strict script.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm curious about I don't know, your intent of what did you want to do, or what did you want to achieve eventually? Did you want to just show Merce Cunningham's work, but what did you want to, I don't know, to say about it? Did you want to have your interpretation of Merce Cunningham's work? Because, you know, he used to say, and it's also said in the movie, that his dance movement and his dance choreography, it's not an interpretation for something else, it's the thing itself. And now you're making a movie about it, so do you want, of course, well, just to show it? Do you want to say something about it? Well, of course you want to say something about it, otherwise you wouldn't done 7 years of film.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think Merce is timeless. I mean, as I said earlier, and I mean, it's a very American story also. You know, I mean, just think about it. It's somebody who just began, you know, and he has incredible integrity. You know, he believed in what he was doing, even though at that time nobody believed in what he was doing, except for his friends, right? So that's a very human story. Anybody can relate to that. The other thing, and I think that now, you know, there's art is very much measured by success at this point. You know, you have to be successful. You know, then you are a good artist. We actually have no chance to fail. But failure is actually part of the creative process. It's part of the growth. It's part of becoming, right? And I think I wanted to bring that story back to show how Merce became Merce. You know, the story of becoming. Because he did fail, he did take risk, and growth and, you know, maturing of the artist takes risk. And again, that can be applied to any profession. It doesn't matter, you know, what you do. You know, you constantly take risk and you fail, and that builds your kind of who you are. And I think that is very, very important to me in this film. And that's very important in Merce's story. I mean, that's first thing. I want to kind of, you know, I want to shake the establishment in a sense. You know, look at this man. You know, he was not Bob Fosse, whom I love. He was not Jerome Robbins. It's not commercial theater, right?
No.
But he stuck with it, and he tapped into something. He said, you know, when dancer dances, they're at best of being human. Now, if everybody in Congress began, you know, on the floor every day, I think we will have much better situation, you know, when they're now. That's very political. This kind of non-involvement. No, but seriously, I think everybody needs to know where their feet are, because nobody does when they walk into those big decision-making process. They physically have no idea where their body is, you know? So I think, so that's one thing. And I think that's why it's so relevant even right now. The other thing is that nobody knows what the dancers really do, you know, in real life. They show up, it's a showtime. Everybody, you understand, you don't understand. I mean, dance is an underdog of all the art forms. Think about it. You come there, you see it, it's there, and then it's gone, right? So you can't, I mean, yes, we're making the movie right now. We're making actually not the movie, it's a cinema piece we're making, you know? So nobody has any connection to what happened before. Even in the Cunningham world, people don't remember that whole story, you know? So I wanted to bring it back, you know, I wanted to sort of remind people how difficult it is and what does it mean to be a dancer. And that, again, can bring everybody together because we all have bodies. Merce's body is an instrument that deteriorates from birth. That is universal. We all deal with our bodies constantly. And I think, again, that's something I really wanted to bring back. And I don't think you need to know anything about Merce Cunningham to watch this film. I think the children, I mean, we did a screenings with children, they get mesmerized, they just look. And that's the goal. I mean, for me, that was one of the goals as a filmmaker. I wanted to achieve the virtuosity in cinema that Merce had in dance. And that's very difficult. It's a very difficult process. And I think that was the intention, to really marry the two, to really find that inch, you know, or centimeter, whatever, depending where country you're coming from, to stand on, to bring these art forms together. And finally, the other thing, I think cinema is losing its physicality these days. You know, right now, the actors don't know even how to cross the room. It used to be, you know, physical performance made cinema what it is. I mean, think about Keaton, yes, and think about all these early physical comedians. They made cinema what it is. Right now, technology steals physicality from the actors, right? They can do anything. They can fly, they can kick, they can fight. But where's our Bruce Lee's? I mean, they're all gone. It's all fake. I mean, I hate that word, actually. It's not real. You know, like, it's so to me, that was another thing. I want to bring physicality back to cinema because cinema is really good at making action and images. That's what it is good at. You know, it's not so much about creating radio plays or theater pieces, you know. So that was the other reason I sort of, you know, wanted to work with Merce and his choreography.
You know, we're towards the end, so our conversation. So I also remind the audience that if they have questions, they can. You're welcome to ask in our Q&A section. And you know, it's always kind of questions that you can't really answer, but I'll ask it even though. What do you think Merce Cunningham would have thought about your movie?
I think
I
he would
don't
be
know.
interested. I think he would be interested because I mean, he was interested in technology to begin with, and as you know, he was doing things. He was not describing it. He was into, okay, let's try, let's do it, let's discover through doing it. So I often think that if he had been alive, he would have used 3D because he used everything from 16 millimeter
Yes.
to motion capture. So I think that is something that would have definitely interested, and because he would have understood what language 3D has. And the best 3D film will be the one that has no cuts. It's kind of like, I don't know if there's a Russian movie you may know, it's called Russian Ark by Alexander Sakurov. It was made in the Hermitage. It's in St. Petersburg. It's a 90-minute single shot film. That film would have been really great in 3D because every time you cut in 3D, you disturb the space, and that a little bit disorients the viewer, so there's a kind of disorientation. So you have to be very careful. So the way we were thinking about that, every choreographic phrase have to resolve in one shot. So from beginning to the end, it's one shot, the choreographic phrase, so that when you arrive to the end of the phrase, you can cut to something else, right? But cutting doesn't work very well. It kind of gets, if you cut too fast, your eyes get disturbed. So I think that is something that, Merce would be interested in, just exploring, like in terms of the language of 3D in connection to his choreography. But for what he would say about the movie, I think he would enjoy it, because I was trying to hear him, to sort of empathize with him. And even though it maybe sounds kind of pretentious, I had to find the equal ground with him to make my own work. It is my work. It's a movie. I had to kind of engage with him as an artist. And I think, I don't know whether he liked it or not, but I mean, I did what I could, and hopefully, he's happy out there. I mean, the film has been doing really well all over the world. So I feel like he would have smiled. I mean, it brought dance, it brought his work. It's exactly what happened with Pina. I mean, it brought his work to people who will never, ever had experience of his work. And that, I think, is, he always said yes to things. So
yeah. Sure. For me as well, I was born in the 70s, so I haven't known him, of course. And for me, one of the things that you did manage to do is I wanted to be there. I want to get back to the 60s and the 70s and see his works live when they were out there, to be right front row on the stage. Of course, we can do it. Not yet. Maybe, I don't know. We're still young. Maybe one day, I don't know, we could be enter some kind of machine to get back to the 60s and 70s. It looked like a nice era to live in and to see this kind of really groundbreaking work. He is unique still, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. He was beyond his time, definitely. I mean, the idea is they explode. We're still processing, but that's true for the whole 60s. I mean, in all art forms, we're still thinking about what has happened and processing. So how people, are there questions? Where are the people?
The people are out of there listening. Maybe you're just saying, wanted to so you're doing good. So we're out of time. So I would like to thank you again for your time and urge you, our audience, to watch the movie. Even though it's not in 3D, maybe one day we'll have the opportunity.
It will be, yes,
so,
it will come. We have great
thank you again.
In Israel, we have a great distributor left, and thank you, Doc Aviv. The guys are fantastic. So hopefully it'll come in a movie theater near you sooner or later. And you can get to see it in 3D.
Yeah.
In 3D, it's really an experience. That's a little different from 2D. I mean, 2D is more of a story. So I really recommend watching it in both ways.